skeleton entertainment.
We're recording.
Let's record.
Let's record.
Sleep early.
We'll actually have to.
Fun night.
We'll have to cover these poems a little faster than I like to, because we have 4 and the other class had 3, and they used up the whole time. But probably we won't take quite as much time because I won't have to spend 15, 20 minutes trying to figure out what when I consider how my light is spent means. I mean, I still don't feel super confident. I mean, I don't understand the purpose of the poem, but I do want to start with My Last Duchess on 910 or 911 really, because I don't know if y'all had the issues the other class did, but they were just kind of having trouble even making sense of what the actual subject of the poem was. 911, 911. Ooh, my voice is gonna die. Okay, so I have a certain voice I read this in, because I think it goes with the character. This is more kind of story-oriented, sort of. It's like an extended kind of speech by one person. Is what this one is. It's a little different than usual, where it's you feel like you're reading someone's thoughts. This one's one person talking to another person. And we just hear them talking the whole time. So,
A lot of talking.
yeah, it's just him. And it starts out, it says Ferrara at the top, and it says, in the 16th century, the Duke of this Italian city arranged to marry a second time after the mysterious death of his very young first wife. So I don't know if it's a reference to the Duke of Ferrara, or he's saying he imagines this is what the Duke of Ferrara would be like, or if this is... I mean, I think it's the Duke of Ferrara, is what he's trying to imply there, but...
He killed his wife.
How in the world did you already come to this
She
conclusion?
dead.
So, here it is. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall. Well, I think I usually do it British, because the guy was British anyway. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Frau Pandolf's hands work busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said Frau Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance, but to myself they turn, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So, not the first of you to turn and ask thus. Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, "Oh, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much," or "Paint must never hope to reproduce the faint high flush that dyed the long high throne." Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, oh, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whate'er she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one. My favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling, even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one, and say, "Oh, just this or that, and you disgust me. Here you miss, or there exceed the mark." And if she let herself be less than so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping. And I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her. But who passed without much the same smile? This grew. I gave commands, and then all smiles stopped together. There she stands, as if alive. Would it please you rise? We'll meet the company below, then. I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed, although his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Nay, we'll go together down, sir. Note is Neptune, though, taming a seahorse. Thought a rarity, which Klaus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. Anybody have any idea what's going on?
That voice was perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Even the hand.
Yeah, no, everything. Like, that sounded like an obnoxious douche, so perfect.
Yeah, it's a kind of how obnoxious douche I got. Douche delivered. That's kind of funny. It'd be funny if like you've got. I was thinking like maybe that could be like self-driving cars. Like once I don't know if you know this, but I think Uber or Lyft has ordered like a huge fleet of self-driving cars so that they can essentially have cars just go around and take people places and they don't have to do anything or pay anybody.
That'd be cool.
Cool for us, the people who are Lyft drivers right now. I'd be like, but
yeah, that
what?
would be really crappy.
Yeah.
I don't even know how much they make. They can't make that much.
Well, actually, there's a guy that works with me.
Yeah.
And he drives for Lyft. And he drove one night and he said he only drove for like 4 hours and he made like $400.
What?
Because of the places that they go. Like,
Dang,
and it depends on like,
But you
I
gotta
think they
find the
do
right
it like,
place.
based on the money that the people make, like it asks you like your job, when you make a profile for this, like it asks you like your job and credit history or something, he said. So if you make more money, then it charges you more to ride with Lyft.
Well, that doesn't sound like it'd work.
Yeah.
That can't be right.
And that's what I was like.
Yeah, that would piss a bunch
He was
of
like,
people
yeah, you
off.
should drive for Lyft. And I was
They'd be like, I am a CEO and I make $20,000 a year. That's what. Okay, so
So a $2 ride.
yeah, it sounds like maybe in the future when like your terrible boyfriend comes home, it's like douche delivered. So now this guy, can anybody tell like what's happening here? Because we had the background of like it's the Duke of Ferrara and his wife mysteriously died, and then we have this kind of speech by this guy to this other dude that he's making. So what's happening in here? Like what's happening? What's he talking about?
He hates his wife, and she obviously died because he killed her.
I don't know if that's so obvious.
You said you don't know what?
I don't know if that's so obvious.
No, but yeah, he doesn't like his wife. I mean, she apparently.
There's definitely something about her that seems to displease him. That's for sure.
He doesn't
I feel like she was a
her,
really kind woman.
Like,
She was
look at
really
him talking
naive.
about
Attention to other people the same as her attention goes to her.
It's all about
Yes.
his arrogance. He thinks I'm this big grand guy. She should praise me more than anybody else because my name is super old. And she didn't because she's kind to everyone. And he was like, well, that's some BS.
Yeah, he doesn't like that at all. He's exactly right. Like he says, my gift of a 900 years old name, she just put with anybody's gift. Like
And he says he
That's
smiles
not
and
okay.
says,
they get married, and she's like, oh,
He's like, woman.
it's nice to marry you. And he's like, oh yes, of course. So he likes it. She's got like a winning smile apparently. She's got like, because the guy remarks at the beginning. He says, you don't see him say it, but he responds to it. He says, you're not the first one to ask what called such a look of joy onto that girl's face. Probably, and he's joking about it. He's like, probably the painter said something like, oh no, I'm looking at the wrong poem. No wonder I was getting confused. I was like, what was that? That wasn't in the poem. It says, oh, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, and she just goes, oh. I like it's so any like little tiny like nice thing that he might say, anybody might say, could just make her look so happy.
She's just really naive to kiss ass.
It's almost like if you ever like meet a girl, if a guy meets a girl who like
Or
really
she
seems to
does
show him attention and like give him that like look that so that look like they're like looking they're looking into you, not just like at your face like yeah, oh, it's just kind of like yeah, and you're just like, oh wow, you're like paying attention to me, I like this. But it's like he's like I really like this, this girl's great. And then the painter's he's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna paint you today. And she's like, yeah, and he's like, That's my wife. Oh, she just looks at people that way? Oh, that's not okay. I don't like that. But I don't think it's really not even said here that it's anything like a sexual look. It's just like she's a nice lady and she gives that nice big smile to everybody.
Yeah, just a really kind lady.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
So you're absolutely right in that regard. Now, where I would say that you might not necessarily be right is in the murder.
Yeah, no, I was just kidding.
Okay, good.
Mysterious death.
She died.
She did.
But he gets so tired of
Killed
it.
her.
He's just so tired of it that he kind of, he's like, well, I will not stoop to tell her what to do. And then what's the last thing he says he did? I guess it's really up. It's really
Tried to tell her what to do.
it's up to.
He stooped.
Yeah, he did. Here's the thing: is that it depends on what the commands were that he made, because he says, "This grew. I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together." And it depends on who he was commanding. Was he commanding the people who worked for him to go and kill her? But that seems
Well, no, maybe
weird.
he was just commanding her to quit being nice to everyone.
Yeah.
Don't smile at them like you smile at me. That's my smile.
What is it?
I tell my boyfriend that.
And he totally
Like,
just
you have
does
to
it,
be
right?
mean
He's
to
like,
everyone, because if not, they're gonna lock you and they're gonna
Yeah.
steal you away.
and he's like, that's normal. So I'll just. What'd you say?
I said maybe he was just being controlling to her.
Oh yeah.
My boyfriend went to a bar the other day.
And the problem with her, I think, is that she's based on the way she sounds so genuine.
Yeah.
Like there's a genuine person that the moment somebody tells her, smile at me like that, not everybody else.
He needed to be mean.
Is that even, that's not going to work, is it?
It's like, what do you even do? Smile like this.
Yep. I wasn't there.
Something tells me she's not going to smile anymore.
Yeah, because she's dead. He killed her.
Did we talk about Harlem? We did, right? The Harlem poem?
Marker.
Marker.
I really feel like if you think of like kind of the idea of like, what happens to a dream deferred, it's kind of like in this case, what happens to kindness suppressed. And I think that we see it so fast because he's just like, this grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. She went from like being alive and smiling to dead and not smiling quickly. And yeah, that's what I feel like. Because that's a lot sadder to me than he murdered her.
If you're a generous person and you're just like, generous. If you're a
And then you're
genuine,
told
like,
to stop being that way.
genuine, like, if you're told not to be that way, you're like,
It's a hard thing to change in a person,
Yeah.
and it
that
can
makes you want
really.
to sit in the closet.
Yeah.
Just in the dark.
So maybe she
Especially
essentially
like
died of a
the
broken
way-
heart because she couldn't be who she really wanted to be.
I do believe that's correct. I think that's what we're kind of looking at here. Died of a broken heart.
No.
Sad.
That's freaking sad.
I bet she was smiling in her casket though.
I mean, maybe
She was
was
surprised.
So she was
free.
finally, she escaped him. What was that?
So she was suppressed.
Uh,
They got everyone else.
so once she died, the smile exploded onto her face.
That would be so creepy. Yeah, that would
funny.
be so creepy. Cause like her eyes would have to be closed because they would be like they would not look alive eyes. And but then
Not look alive
her
eyes.
smile.
Is that the
then there would
technical
be a
term?
Smile, so she'd
That'd
be
be
like
so
smiling
cool.
with her. Well, have you ever seen a dead person's eyes? They don't have that shine. They're like foggy. And,
Usually I see dead person's eyes closed.
okay.
I guess you're the one that goes to the funeral and you're like, oh, I'm going to miss you so much.
Let me open her. So you
No,
can
my aunt used to perform autopsies in college, and so.
Oh, normal stuff. Yeah, okay.
What's so wrong with that?
Yeah, it was
Just
part
kidding.
of her
Like, I was
degree.
like, I applied for an internship at the general.
I thought you meant just for fun. Like, it wasn't, I was like, so she's in college. She also does autopsies. It's just how I
No,
live, guys.
they practiced on cadavers.
I think like she's like in a sorority and then like the autopsy sorority.
No, my aunt is not a sorority person.
Oh man, I hope I have the camera pointed at me. I didn't look. Okay, good.
That's why she was performing.
We're gonna move on to 69. When I consider how my light is spent, John Milton. So there's a lot of background information in the page, or like the paragraph before 69. 69.
Oh well.
Yeah, it's way back there.
Yeah, like. Really.
When I consider how far back that is,
I didn't like this poem.
It's really, really hard to understand.
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna mince words here. Like I just stared at this poem yesterday when we were all talking about it
Yep.
because I assigned it, and then I was like, oh yeah, I like this poem at the time, but I don't remember how long I spent looking at it before I felt like I understood it.
Yeah.
But when I assigned it originally, so I think when I came back here, I was assuming I would just remember everything that I
When
thought
I read
before.
it, I read it
Remember
like a
nothing.
lot.
I was about to say,
I read it several times and I was still like,
I
what
read
is
it like
going on?
twice before I moved on to another poem, and then when I finished
Yeah.
the rest of them, I read it
Again,
because I was
see.
like, what?
Because I still wasn't sure what I was getting out of it.
Like,
yeah.
what?
See, this is a weird poem because if you look at the background information here, I think it's all really important understanding what this even is. So it's really like to me like to have this poem, and I know it gets anthologized quite a bit and it's included in stuff, but it really is like the purest example to me of like people who write autobiographical poems. You know, poems that are about them and their experience. Because it says like he didn't even publish this until 20 years after he wrote it. And it says like on the next page, like kind of in the middle of the page in that big paragraph, it says every author can be considered an audience for his or her own writing, but some authors write expressly to engage in dialogue with themselves. Perhaps Milton wrote his poem partly to convince himself that his religion was still valid and his life was still worth living. And it says, significantly, he did not publish the poem until about 20 years later. So he wrote it, didn't decide to publish it, but it says, yet because he did publish it eventually, at some point he must have contemplated a larger audience for it, or that somebody would find something in it. But when we were sitting there, what was so confusing to me is anytime I read a poem, my first thought is like, okay, what is the purpose of this poem? What is this poem trying to achieve? What is it? And sometimes, like My Last Duchess, it's trying to entertain. By the way, I'm really upset that I didn't make My Last Duchess a blue poem and not a green poem. So anybody who was thinking, oh, My Last Duchess, I like that, I'm going to write my paper about that now. You can do it. Just know that
It's super obvious.
it has some really obvious stuff. And then the one semester I had it in my 1302 class before, I got like, it was Brit Lit. The one class I let them write about that one, I got like out of 10 people, 7 papers on My Last Duchess. And it was a poem that we talked about for like maybe 10 minutes. And I was like,
But
it's upsetting.
It's the easy choice.
Yeah, there's something you could definitely relate it to. So I prefer not to see papers on that. But if this is to people who have made no decision yet at all as to what they're writing about. But that only covers like what, 2/3 of you?
I haven't.
That was meant to be a joke, but
Like,
no
there's
decision.
only
Okay.
2/3 of us in here.
But you've had ideas.
Yeah,
Some people in the room, I think, right now are like, I've thought nothing of this, and I will not until tonight
No, yeah,
at
that's
10.
I'm gonna start my paper when I get home, but I have no idea what I'm gonna write about.
So for those people who have not already looked at this poem and gone, this is really great, and I'm already planning on using this, try not to pick this. Because I meant to make it blue, just forgot. But,
Don't worry.
and I'm talking about the My Last Duchess poem. Consider how my life is spent. You could probably figure out something to do. But another thing to know about Milton is that while he wrote Paradise Lost, like while he was writing it, he was blind the whole time. He's blind. Legally, if not legally blind, he was completely blind. And he had to use an amanuensis to write the whole thing. So there was a dude who would essentially listen to him recite lines to him, and the guy would write them down.
That's personal.
Yeah. So anything he wrote past a certain point had to be written by somebody. So y'all ever heard of Paradise Lost? It's an epic poem, like in the style of, say, he was really trying to do something like along the lines of Homer's The Odyssey, or the Iliad, or Virgil's Aeneid, Ovid's The Metamorphoses. He was trying to make it in that tradition, and he made an epic poem about the fall of Adam and Eve. So it's one big giant long poem about the fall of Adam and Eve, which takes up a chapter or 2 in the Bible, I think, maybe 3. So he's writing this whole big giant story about it, and how
I don't know that I've ever
Came to
read
me.
it, but I've definitely heard about it.
it covers about, like in a normal, like usually if you read it in a book, a poem, it's like a 120-page poem, and he wrote the whole thing while he was blind,
It's like a short story.
like a novel almost.
An actual story.
Yeah, well, I don't have a copy with me, but Homer's The Odyssey and the Iliad are like that thick a
120
piece.
pages is-
Yeah, 120 pages is really not long in the scale of epics, but
No, because
Yeah, it's
the
pretty
Odyssey,
Honestly, was really long.
yeah, the Odyssey is long.
but it's good.
Yeah, it's good. So Milton wrote that whole epic that he's known for while he was blind, and this he wrote apparently as he was going blind. Additionally, it's important to know that, as it says here, King Charles I had installed the leader Oliver Cromwell as head of state after the Puritans executed King Charles I. Oliver Cromwell was head of state, and Milton actually was serving, I think, he was working as an official in Cromwell's government. So as he was alive, he didn't always consider poetry. He always wrote poetry. He didn't always consider that to be his only great purpose. He also felt that politics was really important, so he was heavily involved in politics. He felt that there were very, very important things that needed to happen in the world, and he wanted to have an effect on that. So he wrote a lot of political tracts. Essentially, it was like pamphlets, like political pamphlets and stuff that would go out and be printed. And for a while, he was actually imprisoned for doing that because somebody didn't like the things he was writing.
So this poem is basically about how he's trying to figure out what his life is worth. Is that
what his life is what?
What his life is worth?
I guess in a sense, I would say like what is he supposed to do? Like what can he do? Because he's very politically involved. He wrote Paradise Lost, and he still maintains. I read it differently, maybe than he intended, but he says it's meant to glorify God, and I read it almost as like Satan and Eve are the heroes. When I read it, I'm like, they feel like the heroes of the story. It's very strange, just tragic
but
heroes.
Some people look at it like that.
Because Adam, all he does in Paradise Lost is go, Eve, you shouldn't have done that, meh. And it's like, oh, I guess I'll do it because you did it, meh. And he sounds like a wimp. But Milton maintains that he was doing it not as a form of blasphemy, but to be completely religiously sound. That's why he said he felt he had a duty to God, and he wrote that thing. He also felt like he had a duty to his country. And while he's got both of those duties in his heart, he's going blind. And he's realizing that he has a limited amount of time under which that his gift is writing. And he's like, I have a limited amount of time to use my gift.
That's actually really sad.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what this poem, and why it makes sense maybe that he did it 20 years later. I feel like you have to know all of that, though, before you read it, because if you read that before that, this makes no sense.
Yeah.
But once you do understand, then all the pieces kind of come together.
Because it's all about finding his purpose.
Yeah, I mean, really. So he says, when I consider how my light is spent, and I was like, what is light? When I originally read it, I was like, light, like the light inside of you. And I really think that while that could be the case, like how you spend like that which is within your soul, I think it also is like the remaining time I have left in the light.
Of sight, yeah.
How am I going to spend it? When I consider like how my light is spent, ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide, lodge with me useless. Though my soul more bent to serve there with my maker and present my true account lest he returning child. Oh my gosh, it's like one big long sentence. It always confuses me. So he says, how consider my light is spent, or half my days in this dark world and wide. So he's gone through about half his days so far. Because he wrote it in 52 and it's 1608 when he was born. So he's been about 40 years and he realizes he's probably got at most like 80. And he wrote all of that epic poem after 40, which is not common for a writer to write their greatest work past 40. Although I think Sophocles did it. But
It's the age of wisdom. No, I'm just kidding.
okay, I was like, what are we talking about? I'm not familiar with that phrase. And that one talent, which is death to hide, lodge with me useless. And I'm thinking of, because he's so religious, and I think it mentions this on the next page or down below, like it's the parable of the talents from the Bible. Or like he gives that one, like the owner or the boss or like the leader, I don't know what you call him, I can't remember the guy, but he was going out of town and he says to his servants, he says, I'm going to give you 10 talents, which is a type of coin. He's like, I'm going to give you 10 coins and you go invest it. Or you go, I'm putting you in charge of the 10 and then I'm putting you in charge of 5 and you in charge of 1. The guy who was given 10, he went and invested it and made more money back. The guy who had 5, he invested and made more money back. And the guy who had 1, he was afraid he'd lose it. So he hid it and he went and buried it under the ground. And then he went and dug it up when he came back and said, look, I protected it. And he's like, you idiot. I want to protect it. I want to make more money. So essentially he's considering I think he's considering this in the sense of like a real talent, like his talent, his writing talent. And that one talent, which is death to hide. So when he's saying death to hide, not necessarily writing in general, but in the Bible, when the guy hides the talent, he receives death. He gets killed for it. So he's like, my one talent is lodged with me useless. Like, as I lose my eyesight, I can't. Like, I've got half the world to go, and yet I'm going to have it without sight. So when I consider how my life is spent, though my soul more bent to serve there with my Maker, he's like, the further I get and the more my sight goes away, the more I feel zealous about. You know what zealous is? Zeal is like a intense passion, usually religiously based. Even cult-like based. Somebody might be zealous for Beto O'Rourke or Ted Cruz. So you can have a zeal that's not just religious, but usually it's an intense passion that's very focused. Huh?
I say usually you hear it in church though.
Figure it out in church. Oh, you hear it in church? Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, definitely it's one you hear in church the most. So he's very zealous. He says, I'm even more passionate now about serving my Maker, and I think that that's God, because it's capitalized M. And present my true account, lest he returning chide. It's really weird, though, because he says, lest he returning chide, and it's got a semicolon. I think that's meant to stop it where it was. And I think he's talking about Jesus there, lest Jesus returns, and he chides me like, what have you done? You didn't do enough. You use your talent, blind person. And he says, I fondly ask, is what he says in the next line, so it's got to be him saying it. He says, doth God exact day labor, light denied? As is so, he's asking himself, like, or maybe he's asking Jesus. He's like, so me not having any access to the light, are you still going to expect me to do the things, the day labor, the works and days of my hands that I no longer have access to? Like, what? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I mean, it's back then, it's a lot different in the 1600s. Like, if you lose your sight,
You can't do anything.
I mean, it's not a whole
They
lot.
didn't have a whole lot.
They're like, oh, let me go find disability services, and once I get to disability services, they'll find me, some accommodations. It's not like that. This is like, you're blind, sucks to be you. Sorry, bruh. But luckily, he had some kind of important station, so he ended up being able to still do stuff. And he says, as he asked that question, is God going to exact his day labor? He's going to demand his work still without me having light. It says, but patience, and I guess he's personifying patience here, like the idea of patience, to prevent that murmur, soon replies. It says, oh, no, child. God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. So God doesn't need us to work. I guess it's like, what is it in the Garden of Eden? Is like they didn't have to toil. It was like they could, it was required.
But they didn't have to do anything. It was all there for them. All
Right.
they had to do was not eat the apple.
Yeah, and so they didn't ever really have to work. God didn't need them to work. He just kind of made work a punishment for not doing what he said to do. It was like, hey, don't eat. Just give me one rule, guys. Don't eat that.
One job.
And then, the way people are, we're like, but that looks so good, though.
It's like a juicy
Oh, now a snake is telling me to eat it. Yeah. You got talking snakes. You got delicious fruit. To me, I'm like, no.
We like the hypnotizing snake off the jungle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're gonna eat that fool.
So patience is like, God doesn't need man's work. I mean, he's omnipotent. He doesn't need you to work. He's like, man, guys, I can't. Guys, we need more efficiency on the line. I'm not able to get enough product out. It's not what God is. God can do whatever he wants to. He just has people do stuff because it's what they have to do. He says, who best bear his mild yoke, they served him best. So whoever can take the small, burden that God provides. A yoke is it's what you put on a cow or a yak to pull the plow. And so he actually says it's a mild yoke. It's not even really that hard. So it's like you bear his mild yoke, you bear the light burden it is to be a Christian. They serve him best. His state is kingly. And I think that H is capitalized, of course, grammatically, but I think really it's meant to be God he's talking about there. His state is kingly. Thousands at his bidding speed, and posts o'er land and ocean without rest. So he's like, there's thousands already serving him in that way where they're just like giving back and forth and racing and racing and racing. This is how Christians, are. He's already got like a whole army of them. So he says, they also serve who only stand and wait. So I guess as he's going blind here, he's trying to convince himself, and he's kind of having this dialogue with himself where patience is saying, listen, don't freak out over the fact that you can't do anything right now. You'll still be able to later. It's just, I imagine if you're blind or going blind or, as you maybe lose the ability to walk and you're like in a wheelchair or something, like the world just sort of slows down. There's nothing you can really do about it. It just kind of is that way.
So this is basically his way of justifying, hey, it's okay, take the adjustment period.
Yeah, I think he's saying, he's like, listen, and maybe there is no adjustment period. Maybe he goes blind and that's how life is now. Luckily, later he is able to secure the help of an amanuensis.
Did it ever say what caused his blindness?
I really don't. I think there are theories on it, but I don't remember what those are.
Because the common thing nowadays, if it's gradual like that,
yeah,
is myopic atrophy, which is a genetic thing.
It very well could be. I could have sworn I read that like he was always incredibly well read, and he read by candlelight a lot, and in a sense helped ruin his eyes. I don't know if there was another condition he may have had, but
Well, he died of gout. Just found that out.
died of gout. My gosh, that's terrible. He died at what, 66?
Glaucoma or bilateral retinal detachment.
Okay, so he did have something then. Not just screwing his eyes up by candlelight. All that probably couldn't help. So yeah, I mean he's definitely like disappointed that I didn't even ask y'all to remind me to take the medicine somehow. I just remembered, so I need to. Not yet, but I'm gonna.
10:30.
15 minutes.
10:13.
I'll just put it on the book. Then I'll remember to take it. I'm almost out of medicine. I gotta get some more today.
Really.
I'm just kind of I feel like I'm dying cough. I've got no motivation left. So I mean, I can imagine like, oh, it's gonna suck, and it's gonna suck so much later. Like people work for retirement, which I don't understand. To me, I talked to my wife about this the other day, and I think we realized we never discussed this. I was like, yeah, I don't plan to retire. She's like, well, I do. She's like, we're gonna get an RV and we're gonna ride around the country together. And I was like, oh gosh, that's not what's gonna happen. I was like, I apologize. Like, I'm gonna work till die. Work until I die.
All the way up until noon.
Yeah, until probably I can't work anymore. So like they'll be like,
On the day that I die.
yeah, you just don't move fast enough to work here
But I
anymore.
feel like your kind of work is the work you shouldn't retire from because it's important, like educational wise.
And because my body can probably physically do it all the way to the end. I mean, I imagine somebody's like in construction. They probably want to like, I gotta retire at some point.
Yeah, my husband
Which is why construction has great retirement plans.
Yeah, they do.
Not so much.
They really
Like, I don't know what.
Depending on the company, but it's got to be like,
the insurance is pretty good.
My husband's the safety director of a company. What insurance plan? What 401k?
usually because everything you do in construction, like you don't have people on call really. You've got like, we've got this job and the next job and this job and the next job. That's, I think, why, and essentially, if you look, they're trying to like, a lot of companies are trying to reclassify almost every single type of work as contract work. So they can avoid paying things like insurance, and they can avoid paying things like. Okay, I mean,
The money's great.
Yeah.
But you have to take your own taxes out, because if you don't, you were screwed.
but look, I think that's, and this is terrible for me to say this, but I really think that's unfair because I think it's unfair to make people be responsible. Is that terrible? Because I feel like when you're born into like richness. And you have somebody who's like your financial advisor and they like tell you how you're supposed to spend your money and they essentially like they just put in your bank account, this is all you're allowed to even look at. So here's this and all the rest is going to be making money for you. People don't have that like in the normal world. They're like, here's all this money you have all of a sudden. And the template you have for how to spend it is however you grew up watching your parents spend money.
Yep.
Good luck.
No, that is complete opposite. I saw my parents just
Blow money away.
like,
But true, you're having to be responsible on your own with money, aren't you?
well, yeah.
But I feel like it would almost be like if you didn't spend money responsibly, that you have all the reason in the world not to because you weren't given the right example growing up.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's kind of unfair that in society, like the people who know how to spend money already, they get more money and they know how to spend it again and again and again. And then the people like us, like, I mean, it's really, like, we really underestimate getting the right model. I mean, there are people who are the exceptions in society who they just, you know, they're born into like a poor family on the wrong side of town, and, you know, mom and dad, every time the tax check comes in, and you're like, all right, we got the tax check in. Oh, we can pay bills good so we can have water again. Oh, I already spent it. I went to the casino. What?
Mine was alcohol. My dad was
Alcohol? There's always something. But so it's like, there's no, like some kids will be in that family and go like, all right, I guess I'm just have to like pinch pennies here and I'll have to save up and then I'll get enough to go to college. And it's not really possible for most people though. You just have to have that weird different mindset. You have to be an exception. But for the most part, people can't do that. So I think it's very strange that you've got like contract work where people are told essentially, yeah, save up for your own retirement.
Yes,
People
my
can't
parents
do
were
it.
complete opposite.
They can, but they can't. The vast majority of people can't.
My mom was really good.
Sugar mama.
Yeah, my mom was really good with money. And then my dad, now that they're separated, my dad just blows it.
Mm.
And he owns his own company, so like he's crossing that line between personal and business.
Mm.
So he just keeps taking it out of the business. To
Oh,
pay all
that's
his,
not great.
To pay his spending.
The economy ain't gonna like that.
Nope. Oh, they don't. All right.
Who's not gonna like that?
So.
The economy.
Well, I thought the economy does like that. It's more money filtering into the economy. It's actually great for the economy.
Business is about to go short.
Not so great for dad. Oh yeah, the business is gonna die.
He just has it.
Yeah, it's gonna. Oh yeah, it's not gonna be bad for the economy in the long run because they'll all be eventually on food stamps, Medicaid. So I guess we'll talk about kind of in a combined way because it's easier this way. But the Chimney Sweeper and Tiger, because they're both written by Blake, and I don't think I even realized that I had 2 Blake poems here.
So which one are we going?
We'll do the Chimney Sweeper first. Because it gets at an idea that I was talking about anyway, 898. Yeah, we might even read them just back to back. I don't know. We'll see. Nah, we'll just read this. We'll read this one first. Let's see.
Yeah.
So here we go. Chimney Sweeper by William Blake. So he writes here in 1789 this little 24-line poem. And I'll read it as like young little boys. That's how I usually read it. Young little British boys. When my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 weep. So your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. There's little Tom Dacre, who cried when his head that curled like a lamb's back was shaved. So I said, hush, Tom, never mind it, for when your head's bare, you know that the soot cannot spoil your white hair. And so he was quiet. And that very night as Tom was a-sleeping, he had such a sight that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned, and Jack, were all of them locked up in coffins of black. And by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins, and he set them all free. Then down a green plain, leaping, laughing, they run, and wash in a river, and shine in the sun. Then, naked and white, all their bags left behind, they rise upon clouds, and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom, if he'd be a good boy, he'd have God for his father, and never want joy. And so Tom awoke, and we rose in the dark, and got with our bags and our brushes to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. That's a nice little story, isn't it?
Super sad for me.
Oh, super sad for you? But it's so happy.
It reminded me of Amy.
Because it kind of makes me think his dream basically tells they won't be free until they die.
Yeah, but that's not so bad, right?
That's horrible.
Nuh-uh.
Have a family or love all throughout.
No, you got. I mean, it doesn't matter what crap happens to you in your very short life, where you'll probably die at 10 years old. You've got heaven at the end. God's gonna give you heaven. What does it matter if you die here as a child?
Are you being sarcastic?
Yes, of course.
I'm sorry. I was like, I can't tell if you're being legit or not.
I mean, if you look at this poem, it's essentially like it's probably one of the reasons we have. You know, it's a pretty good. This one's more sarcastic, and it's ironic in its display. So he's being verbally ironic here. I mean, he's putting the words into the mind of a child, and the child's saying,
And
well,
these
it's
children
fine.
have-
It doesn't matter what terrible things happen to me in life because I'll go to heaven someday. And really, I mean, remember we had that discussion that one day about like the purpose of religion in society? Like, how societies will come. I'm not talking about your religion. I'm talking about all the other ones. Like, because you think yours is real, right? The other one's the one I'm talking about. How did those come about? All the ones that you don't agree with. Well, that's under the assumption that you don't think the other gods are real and that you're.
Not you.
There are some people who think all the other gods are real. It's just that yours is the most powerful one, or the one that worth following. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the ones who think that your God is real, but all the other ones are fake and made up and they don't do anything. So like the sociologist I told you about the sociologist, and he was talking about how religion kind of serves a purpose in society. One of the things that a punitive God, a punishing God, usually makes people follow rules. They feel like they want to follow the rules because they're like, oh, I don't want to get punished in death.
Right.
But a loving God too can have the opposite effect, where it's like people feel like, oh, I can get away with doing things, or I can
And the Christian
because I'll be
gods both.
forgiven. Yeah, the Christian essentially you got both God and you got Christ, so it's like you can use it for both kind of purposes.
Which is why Christians are so.
And it kind of makes sense here that essentially what's happening to these kids, and there's another chimney sweeper poem, and it's very, very clear how Blake feels about this. Like, this might sound positive, it can on its surface, even though the content is sad. But Blake's other poem, The Chimney Sweeper, which is called The Chimney Sweeper as well, because this is from Songs of Innocence, this one is, and the other one's Chimney Sweeper from Songs of Experience. And that one is...
Your kid's grown up.
It says that? But the Songs of Experience is like, basically the poem is structured in a way where like, yeah, I'm gonna die because my parents sold me and they suck. Is kind of how that one's
Which
structured.
is the way it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Because I mean, it really like what's really happening here.
He's a child, so the only job he can do is a chimney sweeper because that's the only thing he can actually fit into because adults can't. He's definitely going to die at a very early age.
Yeah, from all that shit he does.
Well, not just that, but like, no, he will.
Where's the other one?
Like it'll
Inhalation.
he'll inhale it into his lungs and it'll get caked up in there and then eventually he'll just stop breathing. Or he'll get ill and no one will take care of him and he'll die that way.
Oh, here's the other one.
He
Here's
has
the other
several options of death. I mean, it could be anything.
one. So here's the other poem, so you can kind of understand where Blake is coming from. The other one is a little black thing among the snow, crying, "Weep, weep," in notes of woe. Where are my father and mother? Say, they are both gone up to the church to pray. Because I was happy upon the heath and smiled among the winter snow, they clothed me in the clothes of death and taught me to sing the notes of woe. And because I am happy and dance and sing, they think they have done me no injury and are gone to praise God and his priest and king, who make up a heaven of our misery. Whoa, that was even worse.
Yeah, that was super dark.
Yeah, super dark. Essentially saying that like people use Christianity as an excuse to do horrible things to people all the
Well,
time.
sometimes people do.
Yeah, I mean it's actually a common thing. It's
Yeah.
it's
My
really say, oh,
grandmother-
it's God's will. Or
She's the world's biggest hypocrite / Christian, and just uses it to shove in people's faces. She's like, I'm this good, perfect Christian, but look at everything you're doing wrong.
She's been
But she
going in on
doesn't
her
even
family
realize that she
the whole
knows.
last year.
Yeah, it's essentially like.
Heartless.
And there's another poem he has called London, which I won't read, but it's essentially like saying that like the parents sell the kids into slavery so that they can have enough money, so that they can then just attend church with everybody else and look nice and rich and. Because if you think about it, at that time, attending church was kind of a leisure activity. Most people are having to work all the time so they can live. But if you have time to just go sit in a room and say, "Oh, God's great,"
But in all
it wasn't quite
honesty,
like today, where we have the democratization essentially of the
I
church.
mean, you think about it because it's bad because how could parents do that to their own child? But in all honestly, they'll probably have a happier life without them because if they hate him that much, they'll be at peace more without them.
Oh, that sounds
I mean,
like a
'cause-
justification.
So just think about it from a current point of view when parents abandon their children but they still have to live with them because they have nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
That's an even sadder situation and the child typically has a more miserable life because of it. Like the parents don't want them but they don't get rid of them.
Yeah.
Like, so they have to sit there and watch their parents.
Now, the problem with William Blake here is that William Blake kind of implies, why can't we just not have kids' lives be crappy? Like, why can't we just not
Well,
do
I mean, yeah,
shitty
that's
things
the
to
world's
kids?
biggest point.
And he's sort of like, really, really, I'll be honest with you, after reading a lot of Blake, I think I've figured out that essentially Blake looked at the world around him and kind of got pissed at God. He said, if God is here, why the hell is he doing all this crap? Like, why is this the way the world works?
I feel like we all.
Why are kids working?
At some
And
point in our lives. Like I did.
this makes us go greatly into the Tiger. Let's read the Tiger.
Well, I actually follow this poem a little bit.
Positively?
He's in a crappy situation and like he has no hope, but then he finds religion, you know, and it gives him hope.
Yeah, and that's the way I looked at it too when I first read it. It gives him hope, and that way he kind of does have a happier
I
life.
read it as it giving him hope.
Instead of just
Yes.
looking, I mean, now he has something to look forward to. He has a family to look forward to, and warmth and love and all of that. Even though his life may still be crappy, at least he knows it doesn't just end in death.
Well, yeah, it's positive for the kid at the time, but with the outside information that I have, essentially, because I mean, I teach this in Britlit too. Not this poem, but actually, I think I do still teach this poem in Britlit. But there's this one from the book is called Songs of Innocence. So usually it's like a very naive speaker saying naive things, and then there's Songs of Experience, which is they're all much darker poems, and if he's saying innocence and experience, one is like you haven't been through life yet, and experience means you have. So the innocent boy here, he's like, oh yes, everything's nice, and but then like, Songs of Experience is where all of his more famous poems come from. The Other Chimney Sweeper, the London, where he's just like, we got women on the street with STDs, we got babies born deformed, we got the palace walls. It's like the church walls are built with the blood of soldiers. All this stuff in London. He's talking about is going on, and so he's really pissed about the way religion is used as an excuse. Not that the problem is I think that he always believed in God, but he was very pissed off at how people were using God, and it made him start questioning whether God was doing his due diligence and making sure that the world was as good a place as it could have been. So in that poem, yes, the Songs of Innocence, it's definitely meant to be that he's finding something positive in a terrible experience. But from the Songs of Experience that come later, and they're definitely, the Songs of Innocence are put first in his book, and the Songs of Experience are put later.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, when he's definitely saying that like these are the ones that show that those are naive.
Because he originally thought that religion was meant to be used for kindness, and then he took a look at the world and got pissed because everybody was using it to be cruel.
Yeah, essentially, and he is not one of the more rich people. Like a lot of the writers that we have from like the past, like the classic writers, were from a fairly affluent background. Milton's parents were essentially were able to afford to give him a classical education. William Blake was not quite like that. He was quite a bit poorer, and so he saw firsthand what poor people went through.
He's probably an old soul.
Old soul?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Interestingly, he was also an artist. He would draw the art that went with all of his stuff.
You know what an old soul is, right?
No.
You know?
I mean, I've heard an old soul. It's like,
It almost is like the belief in reincarnation. That you remember
I didn't
your
know
old
that.
life, that you're a young person who's born with wisdom because you're an old soul.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah,
You're a soul.
I've never put all that extra stuff on there. I've only ever heard. It means like you're young, but you seem wise beyond your years, is how I've heard it said.
Well, usually it's like have a reincarnated soul.
Oh, I didn't realize it was all that complicated.
Well, and it may not be for everyone. That's just the way it was taught to me.
So, and I'm not talking about this is necessarily the way to think of things. I'm saying this is what Blake seems to have thought.
No, right, yeah.
And then if we look at Tiger too, Tiger's a weird poem because you feel like.
Yeah, this one wasn't as obvious for me.
Yeah, so let's read it. So 716 is the page that Tiger is on. I should have said that before I got ready to read. So 716. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, and what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? And when the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the Lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame that fearful symmetry? So what do you see initially? You see anything initially?
I mean, he's questioning, like, why would God make such a fierce creature that's so beautiful? I mean, it's so beautiful yet so deadly. I mean, God makes this lamb. Like, why would He create this killing?
Yeah, but that could represent
Beautiful killing machine. Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely right. That's exactly the question that's being posed. And it's why there are so many questions. I mean, I've never read a poem, I don't think, that has more questions per line than this one. It's just like question marks are all over
it's
the
just
place.
like why?
Yeah, why? I mean, who could do this? Who could do this?
And then it's like, okay, and then your humans are like killing this beautiful creature. Like, does this make you happy?
I don't know. I don't know if they had the huge problem with that back then. I mean, I'd imagine they did, since the British were probably starting to occupy India, because it's 1794. So it's definitely a long, long time ago. But
I mean, they've always killed creatures, especially tigers and elephants, and I mean, for their skin and just because they're so beautiful.
I didn't consider that element. Perhaps that is included in it.
I don't know.
No, it could be. I've never considered it. I usually look straight from the tiger, and you say like the beautiful and the danger, because it's talking about how dangerous it is. So it seems more like the danger is implied against something else, more so than the danger implied against the tiger.
Right.
At least I see.
I just saw like the spear part as like. Okay.
Oh.
But this whole question from the first stanza to the last stanza is like, because I think one of a really significant thing is when he changes could to dare.
Yeah.
It's almost like you can, but should you? Kind of thing.
Yeah. Let me address the stars, the thing. So it says when the stars threw down their spears, were you thinking like throw them at the thing? Like, you know,
Yeah, I took that as, okay, you know, God created this creature, and this creature is killing, and then we have people killing the tiger.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, you know,
No, that
heavens
makes
are
sense.
crying, you know, like, are you happy about this situation?
Yeah.
And see, that's
Did
the-
he smile his work to So yeah.
Well, see, now here's the weird thing is I read it the way you read it for about 4 years, and a student mentioned something in class, like when I said stars threw down their spears, and I went like this, like I was in the heavens, and I was the stars, and I'm throwing my spears down, and I said those lines have always confused me because I don't know why you'd be doing it, and you said like maybe throwing it at the tiger and killing the tiger, the beautiful tiger that you just made, and but I always wonder like why are they watering the heaven with their tears? So they kill it or kill something, and then they're upset about it. Like, it never made any sense to me. And then this student said, oh, I didn't think that meant they threw it with intent. I thought they threw down their spears. Like, you know, when you say you throw down your spears, it's like you have your spear in your hand and and you're just like, no, like I can't. And then they watered heaven with their tears. They're all upset. And I was like, huh? The tiger kills me.
Yeah.
Well, it says though, it does say the stars threw down their spears. So it's like literally the heavens are throwing down their spears, almost like giving up. Like,
Almost like because this thing is so beautiful.
and I think it's different.
Okay.
Because you see lamb, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's unique about the word lamb in this case?
Capitalized.
Capitalized.
That says the Lamb of God.
Lamb of God, which is who?
Jesus.
Jesus. So, did the person who made the lamb also did he smile his work to see when he made the tiger? Did the same guy who made the lamb, Jesus, make thee? So, who could the tiger be if the lamb is Jesus? Yeah, I heard devil, Satan. So that it's really like an overarching metaphor for Satan. And tiger's perfect for it because the tiger is beautiful and dangerous.
And sneaky.
And you might say that, well, sin is not beautiful. Sin is gross. We always see devil as like this
But the
disgusting
devil doesn't
thing.
necessarily represent sin.
Oh, he does.
I don't think so.
He does. Because if you think is sin itself, like what is sin? It's like doing the wrong thing. Yeah, defying God. So the thing about it is it's pretty. Doing the wrong thing is. If it wasn't, people wouldn't do it.
I was gonna say people like it.
Yeah, people
pretty
find
for a
it
little while.
tantalizing, right? I mean, people cheat on people steal. They don't do it because it's very, very off-putting.
It's good.
I mean, like, yeah, in the moment, like, they go, oh, man, this is exciting. I'm going to do this thing.
But that's why he first appeared as a snake in the Bible. Because, like, that's everything. Like, a snake, like,
Yeah.
people are always captivated with snakes and everything, but they're super dangerous. Well, some of them are. You know, like, I don't know.
I don't know, maybe.
From a science point of view, like, I'm always really interested in snakes.
Most people I
would
know,
never
like, they see a
found
snake
one.
and they go, ah! Like, that's the first reaction.
I don't know, I'm always just really curious.
But I guess if there's nothing there in the Garden of Eden to, like, be dangerous, like, a snake comes up. She's like, hey there, little buddy.
Oh, yeah. She's like,
You know, she's like, I don't have any snake, like, prior knowledge.
she's like, I don't know danger.
Well, so sin really, I mean, to the people who do it is very, like, tantalizing. You know, it's attractive. And I can think of, like, the people who are like, imagine the first time you see a tiger, right? You, like, see it in the woods, you know, and you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
look at this thing. It's adorable. And maybe you get closer and you're like, it's kind of big though. But it's
And then it
pretty.
growls
It's like a big kitty.
You're like, oh, hell no.
And then you get closer, you're like, I just want to see it. I just want to see it. I want to see it. And then it's like, rah, and it kills you. But you're just like, oh, you're drawn to it. You're like hypnotized. Like, it's so beautiful.
I'd like to pet one.
I would too. I mean, there's apparently
So
some.
soft.
There's apparently a tiger conservatory around here somewhere, like in Roy City or Rockwell or Dallas or. Wait, Wiley, right? Yeah.
It's called Instinct Exotics.
And it's cool, right? Because you can actually like go right up to the tigers, basically,
Yeah,
right?
they-
Not right up to the tiger.
Well, they let you.
You can shake hands with the tiger. You can put your hand in the cage, and he will eat you. No,
And
can't
you
do
know
it.
what?
There's two different fences. There's their
Imagine getting your
enclosure,
hand
and
bitten
then
off
there's
by
a
a
walkway
Yeah.
for the handlers to walk around
Oh, okay.
the enclosure with another gate. So you're a good 2 foot from
Oh, okay.
your little hand can't get in there. But it's cool hearing them roar and howl and just all kinds of crap.
I read too that they don't purr. They have some other sound that's
It's a-
different.
And,
Yeah, it chuckles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like, or it's like
and then
that.
right down the street from there.
It's almost it's like a chuckle purr.
A chuckle
Hang
purr.
on. It's all. Have you seen the movie?
Jungle?
The tiger.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's.
Jungle Book.
The tiger in that book is.
I can't even remember it.
Tiger movie.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Where it's the little kid.
makes- Yeah,
Pie.
Yes.
Is it Pie?
No.
Life of Pie?
No.
Oh,
No,
he's
I
I love
love
that
that
movie.
tiger.
That's such a good movie.
But he's
It was
it's
super
the one with
long.
the he has the 2 kids. His wife has died.
Oh.
They go and they.
We bought a zoo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Promised Land? Is that
Oh
what it
my
is?
God.
Yeah.
Is that Damon?
Couldn't think of
Yeah.
that guy.
Yeah. Promised Land.
Oh yeah.
remember.
Well, so tiger.
Wait,
Does it-
but do you
Yeah.
know what else is actually really cute but mean? Really mean? A
A
squirrel.
rabbit.
Yeah. Squirrels are assholes.
Okay, I snuck up on a squirrel. It was on the tree. I was like, "You look so soft," and I pet it and it attacked me. It was awful.
I think that William Blake considered using. I think William Blake considered using a squirrel, but since a tiger can attack and kill a lamb, and since the tiger is slightly more beautiful than the squirrel is, I think that's why he settled on tiger and not squirrel. Especially since I think in England they have black squirrels.
Like we have squirrels in my trees, and I'll walk outside to get into my car, and they'll start talking shit to me. They'll be like, they'll chitter at me and everything. I'm like, what do you want from
All
me?
right, I'm cutting off the squirrel talk. We got to talk about good and evil here.
Anyway,
The bad thing is usually pretty attractive. That's why people do it. I mean, it's, people, there's just something about it. Like, there's like doing the wrong thing. It's just, a lot of times the wrong thing is easier or it's just more fun.
Yeah, I remember that.
I don't have it with me. I used to have it on my phone. I need to find it, favorite it, and make it something I always bring up. But it's like a tweet, and I think I may have mentioned this in another class before. Maybe y'all heard it in the past. But it was like a tweet where a girl like essentially tweeted out, she was like a Christian girl, and she says, I'm a good Christian girl, never had sex, don't smoke, don't drink, and like I don't, show my body like when I dress, like I'm, nice with my dress. It's like, where's my man? Kind of like I don't have a man. Like it's, I don't understand. Like I'm doing everything right.
Yeah.
And then there was a girl who retweeted and like replied, and she said, I smoke, I drink, I dress slutty, I will do a thing to him, some certain thing, whenever he wants. And I've had sex with a ton of guys.
Still no guy.
Your man's with me.
Oh. Just kidding.
Like essentially, like she's like, why can't I find a guy? And then this other girl's like, because you're not doing all the things that guys want to be done. That's what it gets down to it. Because to be honest, it probably is really hard for that girl to sit there and like not do all the things she wants to do all the time. And crazily enough, I've read too that it can, this is weird, but it can actually have negative effects on human psychology. Like in religions where people stigmatize sex and they talk about how bad it is all the time. They try to talk about how great it is, when you're in a married relationship. But basically, if you think about sex prior, they're like, and so it's so stigmatized that so when they get into marriage, sometimes they actually, when they first start to have sex, it's in terms of like they literally feel like they're doing something wrong. So that they never end up being a sexual couple, which is that's terrifying to me. So like even sometimes doing the right thing it's not going to always be pleasant. And I think that's essentially what the girl was trying to say. What he's trying to say here is like the right thing is not always that attractive, but the wrong thing sure is. And his question here, like the conceit, or not conceit, the philosophical nugget that still exists today that people are still arguing about is if you have a good God, as a pure and good God who created a universe, right? You can argue all around this all the ways you want to, but if it's an all-powerful God who can do anything that he wants anytime, just like Thanos, God can snap his hands, devil's gone. Gone. No sin, no devil. But he doesn't. So if you are the architect of everything and you allow a Satan to exist, and you're the architect of everything, essentially everything that you made resulted in the Satan, which means you essentially allowed Satan to exist, which means you also created him in a sense. So it's like, huh?
Did you take your medicine?
Yes, I did actually, thank you. So that question is always this: how does a good God allow a Satan to exist? And how can good and evil exist simultaneously?
Well, the whole justification of that is free will. Is that our God is supposed to give us free will to make our own decisions and corrupt our soul how we choose.
True. But so people look at that and say, well, then God's cruel because you got like people doing horrible things to people all the time. You got priests raping children.
But God is no longer involved at that point.
See, that's how they justify it. But God could go on.
No, he could.
But God thinks it's apparently more worth it to have the good people who praise him properly.
But that's all.
And yeah, you get priests raping children. Oh well.
That's all about faith, though.
But that's kind of, if you think about it, if you're the person who created everything and you're like, so I mean that's the kind of the argument that people have is like, you can say, oh, everything that's sin is not God. But that means God's not all powerful.
No, yeah, exactly.
So there's all this philosophical like logic stuff people have been trying to figure out for like centuries, and we've yet to solve this problem. So 200 years ago when he asked this question, it's still a question.
My boyfriend puts
it still makes people stop believing in God daily.
He says that you can be all-knowing or you can be all-powerful, but you cannot be both.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, he's not faithful at all. But he says, well, think about it, because if you were all-powerful and all-knowing, then you would know everything, and you would most likely put a stop to it, just as a human. And we're supposed to be made of God, so technically God would see it this way too. So he's either one of the other, so he's either, I don't know, he's either a good guy or a bad guy. Because if you're all powerful, that usually makes you seem bad, but if you're all knowing, that usually makes you seem good. And usually, when people look at God, they look at everything that's associated with him. Not all the good he's done, but also all the bad he's done.
You could also mean that our conception of what is perfect is wrong, and that to allow evil to exist is not necessarily a bad thing.
It's all in the balance of
Have y'all ever watched the TV shows? You watch movies, you watch TV shows, you read books. Y'all know that one where like the good guy, nothing bad happens to him, and he gets all the way to the end and everything's fine? No.
That never happens.
No, like, what are you talking
Because
about?
everything's interesting when you have some conflict. So without conflict, without evil, good has no meaning almost.
Exactly.
Everything's neutral.
Exactly.
But then how do you justify still? It's like he's saying we have to have evil so we can have good. Some people say we can't ever get rid of the poor because then it won't mean anything to be rich. And I was just like, but I don't like that. I don't know. But I mean, y'all can think about this question. And it's just a question I'm posing. I'm not arguing for or against either side. I'm just saying, like, this is the question and the way it's been posed for centuries, and it still hasn't been answered. You have a great day.
It's almost the same question that the ones who walk away from the Lord.
It's kind of, that's more like a human level. This is more on like a cosmic level.
Yeah, but
My
still,
knee almost dropped off
yeah.
my
But it's a more dilemma that'll never be solved.
Yeah. Yes, it's something, nobody will ever answer that question.
Unless somebody comes back from the dead and answers it. But I don't see that happening.
God.
Unless in some near future we manage to create immortality and we solve all the problems of the world.
I do have a theory that if we ever solve immortality, you'll see the news the next day also says, richest people of the world come together and agree we must stop ruining the planet. Climate change must be solved now. Because they're like, oh, I want to live forever? Shoot.
Okay, we better keep
We gotta keep this planet okay, because I'm going to have to be able to use it forever.
Yeah, no, that's what my boyfriend says.
It's like I thought I was going to die in 20 years. And
He says, I don't give a crap about global warming. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. He's not the best person.